When a young boy stops to help a stranded millionaire, he thinks he's just fixing a tire. But what happens next? It changes everything. His simple act of kindness collides with an opportunity he never saw coming. The sun was setting over the quiet road, the sky streaked with gold and amber. Samai was walking home, his worn-out backpack slung over one shoulder, when he spotted the luxury sedan sitting on the side of the road, one tire completely flat. A well-dressed man stood next to it, scrolling through his phone, frustration etched on his face. Samai had no idea that stopping to help was about to become the most important decision of his life. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. Stay till the end. You won't believe how this one ends. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting streaks of gold and amber across the sky. The quiet road stretched ahead, the distant hum of traffic barely audible. Samai adjusted the straps of his backpack, kicking a loose rock as he walked. It had been a long day at school, and he was just trying to get home. Then he saw it. A black luxury sedan, sleek and spotless, except for one thing. A completely flat tire. The car was pulled off to the side of the road motionless, like it didn't belong there. Beside it, a man in an expensive suit stood with his phone in hand, frustration clear on his face. Daniel Carter. He scrolled, exhaling sharply, shaking his head, probably waiting for roadside assistance. Samai almost kept walking. After all, what could a kid like him do for a man like that? But something made him pause. Maybe it was the way Daniel kept checking his phone, like he was running out of options. Maybe it was because Samai knew what it felt like to be stuck with no one around to help. So, instead of walking past, he turned back. He had no idea that this one decision, a simple moment of kindness, was about to change his life forever. Have you ever stopped to help a stranger? What happened next? Tell us in the comments. Samai tightened his grip on the straps of his backpack. He had no reason to stop. He didn't know this man. He wasn't getting paid, but something inside him wouldn't let him walk away. Need some help? He asked, his voice even. Daniel Carter barely looked up. He was too busy scrolling on his phone trying to get through to roadside assistance. No, I'm fine. They'll be here soon. His tone was distant, like he was brushing off an unnecessary distraction. Samai glanced at the flat tire. It was bad, but nothing he couldn't handle. He looked back at Daniel, who still hadn't even glanced his way. I can fix it, Samai said. That got Daniel's attention. He turned, finally taking in the boy standing before him. His gaze flicked over Samai's worn-out school uniform, the heavy backpack slung over one shoulder. You, Daniel said, the doubt clear in his voice. Samai nodded. Yeah, my dad was a mechanic. He taught me everything before he... His voice trailed off, but he shook it off quickly. I know what I'm doing. Daniel sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Listen, kid, I appreciate it, but I don't need you getting hurt messing with my car. Samai didn't argue. He just walked over to the trunk and tapped it lightly. You got a spare? Daniel hesitated. This kid wasn't backing down. After a moment, he pressed the button on his key fob. The trunk popped open. It's in there. Samai dropped his backpack on the ground and got to work. He loosened the lug nuts with ease, his small hands moving like he had done this 100 times before. He lifted the spare, rolling it over with precision. Daniel crossed his arms, watching closely. At first, he expected the kid to struggle, to fumble with the tools, to take forever, to prove why this was a bad idea, but he didn't. Samai worked fast, tightening bolts, checking the alignment. His face was calm, focused. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from roadside assistance. ETA 40 minutes. He glanced back at Samai. The kid was already halfway done. You do this a lot? Daniel finally asked. Samai shrugged. Not really. My mom doesn't have a car, so I don't get to practice much. Daniel frowned slightly. You don't have a car? Nope. Same didn't even look up as he secured the last bolt. I walk everywhere, school, grocery store, home. Daniel's brows knitted together. How far is school? Same finally stood, wiping his hands on his pants. 3 miles. Daniel stared at him. 3 miles. Twice a day. Every day. The kid had just changed his tire in less than 10 minutes without hesitation, and he walked 6 miles a day because his family couldn't afford a car. Something about that didn't sit right. Same grabbed his backpack, slinging it over his shoulder like nothing had happened. You're good to go. Daniel checked his watch. 10 minutes. A professional couldn't have done it much faster. Daniel reached into his pocket, pulling out a crisp $100 bill. Here, you earned it. Same looked at the money, but didn't reach for it. I don't need money. Daniel's hand froze midair. Kid, you just saved me a ton of time. Take it. Same smiled, shaking his head. My dad always said, help because you can, not because you have to. Daniel's fingers curled around the bill as he lowered his hand. A 13-year-old just refused money from a millionaire. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt speechless. He looked at Same, really looked at him. This kid was different. And Daniel suddenly knew this wouldn't be the last time they met. Daniel sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel. He watched as Same adjusted his backpack and started walking away. No hesitation, no expectations. The kid had just fixed a flat tire for a complete stranger, refused money, and went on with his day like it was nothing. Daniel wasn't used to that. In his world, nothing came without a price. People always wanted something: money, favors, connections. But Same? He just helped and left. Daniel rolled down his window. Hey, kid. Same turned, raising an eyebrow. Daniel hesitated, then gestured toward the passenger seat. Let me give you a ride home. Same shook his head. I'm good. I walk every day. Daniel frowned. Come on, you just did me a favor. Least I can do. For a moment, it looked like Same was going to refuse again. Then finally, he sighed and walked over. He opened the door carefully, like he was afraid of messing up the leather seats, and slid in. The car was silent as Daniel pulled back onto the road. He glanced at Same out of the corner of his eye. The kid sat straight, hands resting on his lap, looking out the window like he wasn't in a millionaire's car. So, what do you want to be when you grow up? Daniel asked. Same didn't answer right away. Then he said, an engineer. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Engineering, huh? Good money in that. Same shrugged. It's not about the money. Daniel smirked. Right. Help because you can, not because you have to. Same smiled. Exactly. Daniel's smirk faded. He had worked his whole life for wealth, power, and status. But sitting next to this kid, it hit him. He had never met someone so selfless. He turned onto a quieter street, lined with small, worn-down houses. Same pointed ahead. That's my place. Daniel slowed down. The house was small but well kept. A porch light flickered. A woman stood at the door, her arms crossed, looking down the road. As soon as the car stopped, she was already stepping forward. The second Same got out, she grabbed his shoulders, looking him over. Are you okay? What happened? Same smiled. I'm fine, Mom. I just helped this guy with his car. Daniel stepped out, nodding politely. Ma'am, your son is a good kid. He fixed my tire in minutes. Her eyes softened, but there was caution there too. Thank you for bringing him home. Daniel hesitated. He had met plenty of powerful people, CEOs, politicians, industry leaders, but standing in front of this woman, he felt something he hadn't in years. Respect. She wasn't rich, she wasn't famous, but she had raised a boy with values that no amount of money could buy. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. Listen, I own a company downtown. We have a mentorship program. If Samai is serious about engineering, I want him to come by. We can set something up." Samai's mom looked at the card, then at Daniel. "Why?" Daniel glanced at Samai. "Because he reminds me of myself at his age. And I had someone who gave me a chance. I'd like to do the same." There was silence. Then, slowly, she nodded. "We'll think about it." Daniel smiled slightly. "That's all I ask." As Daniel got back in his car, he didn't feel like the same man who had been stuck on the side of the road an hour ago. He had expected to lose time today. Instead, he had gained something he didn't even know he needed. And something told him this was just the beginning. Samai sat at the kitchen table, staring at the business card in front of him. His mother sat across from him, sipping tea, her eyes flicking between him and the small white card with Daniel Carter's name printed in bold letters. The name meant nothing to her, but she knew one thing. A man in a luxury car doesn't just hand out opportunities for no reason. "You trust him?" she finally asked. Samai shrugged. "I don't know, but he seemed different." His mother didn't say anything right away. She had spent her whole life being cautious, knowing that nothing in this world came without strings. But she also knew her son. He had a good heart, and she had raised him to recognize real kindness. Finally, she nodded. "All right, let's see what this is about." The next day, they stood outside a tall office building downtown. It was nothing like the small, local businesses Samai was used to. The glass doors reflected the sky, and when they walked in, the air smelled of fresh coffee and success. A receptionist greeted them and led them down a long hallway. The office at the end had Daniel Carter's name on the door. Inside, Daniel stood up, smiling. "Glad you made it." Samai and his mother sat down. The room was lined with awards and framed articles, all about Daniel's success in the business world. But he didn't talk about any of that. "Samai, I meant what I said. I see something in you. You have skills, intelligence, and the kind of attitude most people take years to learn." Samai listened, unsure where this was going. "I started out with nothing, too." Daniel continued. "Someone took a chance on me when I was your age, and it changed everything. I want to do the same for you." Samai's mother folded her hands on her lap. "What exactly are you offering?" Daniel leaned forward. "A full-ride scholarship to one of the best engineering schools in the country. Everything covered. Tuition, housing, books." The room went silent. Samai's heart pounded. A full scholarship. He had always dreamed of becoming an engineer, but college was something he never let himself think too much about. They couldn't afford it. He had accepted that. His mother's voice was steady. "Why would you do that?" Daniel smiled. "Because I can." Samai barely heard the rest of the conversation. His mind was racing. One moment, he was fixing a stranger's tire. Now, his future was completely different. His mother finally looked at him. "It's your decision, Samai." He swallowed hard, staring at the business card that had brought him here. Then slowly, he nodded. "I'm in." Samai sat on his bed, staring at the acceptance letter in his hands. Full scholarship. Everything covered. It still didn't feel real. Just a few weeks ago, college had been nothing more than a distant dream, something people talked about but never really considered for kids like him. His mother walked in, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. She had read the letter at least 10 times, but she still picked it up again, shaking her head in disbelief. "I never thought we'd see something like this," she said softly. Samai nodded. "Me neither." Daniel Carter had stayed true to his word. The moment Samai agreed, things moved fast. Paperwork, school applications, meetings. For the first time in his life, someone with power had seen him and decided he was worth investing in. The day before he was supposed to leave for college, Daniel invited him back to his office. It felt different walking into that building now. The first time, he had been nervous, unsure of why a man like Daniel had taken an interest in him. Now, he walked in with his head high. Daniel was waiting in his office, a folder open in front of him. He looked up and smiled. "You ready?" Same nodded. "Yeah, more than ready." Daniel closed the folder. "I want you to understand something, Same. This isn't just about you. You're going to go to college, get your degree, and do great things. But one day, you're going to be in my position. And when that happens, I want you to remember what happened here today." Same listened carefully. "Someday, you'll have the chance to change someone's life the way yours is being changed right now. Don't forget that." Same took a deep breath. "I won't." 4 years later, the moment came full circle. Same stood in front of a different office, Daniel Carter's company. This time, he wasn't here as a kid fixing a tire. He was here as an engineer. His heart pounded as he walked through the doors. Everything had led to this moment: the scholarship, the classes, the late nights studying. He had worked harder than ever before, determined to prove that Daniel hadn't made a mistake investing in him. When he reached Daniel's office, the door was already open. Daniel looked up from his desk and grinned. "You made it." Same smiled back. "Told you I would." Daniel leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "And to think, I almost didn't let you touch my car that day." They both laughed. Daniel stood up and extended his hand. "Welcome to the team, Same." As they shook hands, Same realized something. His life had come full circle. He had walked 6 miles to school every day. He had been dismissed by people who never looked twice at him. He had been underestimated. But in the end, one act of kindness had changed everything. And now, it was his turn to pay it forward. Sometimes, life changes in ways we never expect. Same didn't stop that day because he thought he'd get something in return. He stopped because it was the right thing to do. He had no idea that one small act of kindness would lead to a full scholarship, a dream career, and a mentor who believed in him. But this isn't just about Same. It's about the power of opportunity. How many people out there have potential, but never get the chance to prove it? How many kids are walking miles to school right now, just hoping for a better future? This story is proof that one moment, one decision, can change everything. And now, it's your turn. Have you ever helped someone, and it changed everything? Or has someone ever given you a chance that changed your life? Tell us in the comments. We're reading every single one. If this story inspired you, don't just keep scrolling. Share it with a friend, a family member, someone who needs to hear this today. And if you believe in stories that show the power of kindness and perseverance, hit that subscribe button, because this is just the beginning. What would you have done in Same's place? Drop a comment below. Let's talk.